Well, hey Kyle, it's good to see you. So I was trying to think back to how long we've known each other, and I think it's been 10 years, right? Something like that. Like, how long have you been in educational technology total?
Yeah, I think I'm on 12 or so years. Started in distribution first before we had met. So yeah, we're probably on 9 years, 10 years,
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you used to work for a cart manufacturer, and I used to work for a different reseller. Now I'm still a tech reseller, just with my own company now. And, you were my channel rep, right? So you were out there introducing products to me and my team. And I was always impressed. Like, you were always a great communicator and super friendly. But you had this dark secret that not many people knew about. And you had to really, keep to yourself, which is you kind of loved farming, right? So talk about that a little bit. How long have you been farming, you and your family?
Yeah. So I married into it. My mother-in-law used to call me the city boy. And so I would call her country mama. That's how I started building rapport with my future mother-in-law.
You could write a book on it. Yeah. Just call your mother-in-law names right off the bat.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's how it started. So yeah, my father-in-law is a big conventional corn and soybean farmer like you expect to see in the Midwest.
Wow.
And he's got a big operation, and it was always interesting to learn that. And so yeah, I was living in Madison, in the city proper, and my wife, like, we knew like the country was the future because that was where she grew up and she wanted to get back there. So yeah, it was just one day like, all right, we're moving to the country.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, all right, let's go. And by that point, I had taken enough trips to the farm, and they're in a pretty rural area in Michigan. And yeah, it was kind of adjusted to like what that might look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely not, going into Minneapolis or Chicago or, places to visit resellers. There's not a lot of common ground there when you start talking about, breeds of chickens and
Yeah.
a 1,500 square foot garden and those sorts of things. And so, yeah, when we moved out to, 4.5 acres, about 8.5 years ago now, I don't call myself a farmer. Maybe hobby, maybe homesteader.
And you've seen proper farmers, right? So for you, it doesn't, what you guys do doesn't feel like a lot. But like you said, compared to the average person who's in technology or even in education, you were doing more than most. We connected maybe a year or so ago. We were talking about chickens somehow. And I was like, oh, my chickens, they're not laying a ton of eggs. And, you said, well, how many chickens do you have? I said, oh, we've got about 10, 11 chickens. And so then I asked you, because I didn't know your deep, dark farming homesteading secret. And I was like, well, how many chickens do you have? Because obviously you knew stuff about chickens. And how many chickens do you have now or a year ago?
25.
And I was like, that seemed like more chickens. Like, I thought I was really impressive with my, 10 chickens. And then you start listing your other livestock, and then you start listing your farm. But you were living in this world where you're selling educational technology and talking to schools all the time. And then you found this very interesting company that took a passion of yours and an experience of yours and kind of merged them together. So how did you even find out about Fork Farms? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, that's what everybody's looking for, right? When your passion becomes your job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So lucky in that respect. So yeah, Fork Farms is a part of a startup incubator called Titletown Tech that is supported by Microsoft and the Green Bay Packers.
Nice. Nice.
And so I think I picked it up watching football.
No way. Nice.
I am also a Bears fan living in Wisconsin. So there must have been a Bears-Packer game. And because Titletown Tech is right there next to Lambeau.
All the Wisconsin schools that were listening to us just ended just right there, right?
Yeah. Luckily, I'm not the Wisconsin contact.
Yeah.
So
good.
So you don't have to talk to me if you're in Wisconsin.
Okay, good.
Well, yeah. So it must have been one of those flyovers, going into commercial break, and you see Titletown Tech, and So I started looking into what is that, and what are the companies in their portfolio. And I started following Fork Farms on LinkedIn and seeing what they were doing. And when kind of timing was right, I reached out and I was like, oh, these are my people.
Maybe just take a second and explain, like, how do you set up a hydroponic garden at a school? And, you're talking about setting stuff up in Wisconsin, which does not have the most favorable climate about half the year, right? So what is it that Fork Farms does provide for schools?
Yeah, that's right. So there are lots of hydroponic systems, and there's DIY ways to do it, right? Hydroponics is just growing with nutrient-enriched water, no soil. And there's even some variations kind of within that. What we have, we call a flex farm. It's a hydroponic system. It's all self-contained. It's about the size of a refrigerator. And it's also vertical, which is maybe not necessarily the common hydroponic setup. A lot of times you can see it laid out flat, almost looking like gutters on a house sort of laid out. So that's part of the system. The Flex Farm is kind of how we help bring hydroponics to K-12 and vertical spaces outside of K-12 as well, including like real farms growing food for sale or for consumption in their community.
And I watched a few videos on how folks kind of set these up, and what they need, it seems like, is some kind of space. Although again, the flex in the Flex Farm is not just how compact it is, but it's on wheels, right? It's like, if for some reason you needed to move them, you could, which is really interesting. They looked easier to move than a refrigerator, but they need a space, and they need electricity, and they need water, and you guys seem to provide, everything else. So what do you guys provide for the hydroponic farm?
Yeah. On top of the unit itself, we also have a curriculum package that's laid out by grade band. And that's, something new for me to actually have this curriculum package that supports teachers. It's really well done. It's done to next generation science standards. And so it's really a way that teachers can sort of pick up and go right away without their own knowledge in the product or in the technology and what hydroponics is. We also support a lot of sort of how-to videos too, the like technical, like this is how you check your pH. This is how to figure out how much nutrients you need to add. And really, I like to tell people, like, I'm not here to sell you a piece of plastic. Like, I'm not successful unless you're growing food and being successful in that manner, because that's our end goal. Help educate, maybe where food comes from, help educate on nutrition, provide food where food isn't, and make food insecure areas a little bit more food secure.
Yeah, because, as long as you're in a relatively temperature controlled environment, right, you can grow all year round. And now you have schools growing their own food. And, I live in California. Trying to have gardens is a big initiative, right? But it takes a lot of real estate, a lot of work. You still get bad weather in California. And so, the idea of growing your own food can be pretty romantic, but it can be also very difficult to truly manage that. And you guys even provide the nutritional supplements as well, too, right? That they add to the water. So you guys are really providing this garden in a box, for a school that wants to grow, say, their own lettuce, or they want to grow. Besides lettuce, like, do you guys grow other stuff?
I want to say, too, with that, farm purchase, we're giving you enough supplies for 3 cycles, so about 3 months. So when it's delivered, you don't need to buy anything else. It's all there in the package, including access to the curriculum and other supporting videos. Primarily what we're growing are sort of lettuce, leafy green, herbs, culinary herbs. Those are sort of like what we can really do at a large volume. We can do a lot of other things too, tomatoes, cucumbers, snacking peppers. So you can do fruiting plants, and then you start talking about, like, well, how does that get pollinated? And there are just certain varieties. There's ways to hand pollinate. There's other tricks and tips to help through that. And I think that's the thing too, is that we have such an experienced team behind us. I mean, we have former professor from the University of Northern Michigan and a handful of her former students, people that studied controlled environment agriculture.
You said this to me the other day. You said you finally don't feel like the weirdo in your own company, right? Where before you might have brought a partner a bag of produce grown from your garden because you just found that one other closet, naturalist or farmer. Or again, in your own office, you're like, hey, how's everybody's chickens doing? But it's like now, like you said, there's just chats ongoing all the time about, soil work, people doing their own gardens or again, doing their own hydroponic. So you guys are just all the time geeking out on actual, produce and growing, right? How cool. I mean, that's the company's culture that you're providing. Like, this is not just like a technology startup driven by a bunch of hard investors and entrepreneurs, like these are farmers, these are growers who are interested in bringing this to schools. Which I thought that was such a cool commentary. So you found your people.
That's right. Yeah. And that came up in the interview too. They're like, oh yeah, when it comes to springtime, everybody's gonna be talking about their garden. We're like, which varieties should I plant, or like different styles. I had a coworker sort of share this, like someone called it a chaos garden that she had started, where it was just like a lot of everything in an area, and it was just like, let's see what happens.
Very cool. It's funny. So in the course of our conversation, and when you first got hired, I was like, man, this is so great. This seems like this is, like you said, like your experience now, technology, education, matching your passion. And one of the things you mentioned to me was this. Here's a case study you might be interested in. Right here in my hometown, Reading School District does this, and the video is great, high quality, and it was actually brought in, interestingly enough, not necessarily under the educational arm of the district. It was brought in under the food service and nutritional part, right? So, and they saw, they're like, hey, there's different USDA grants for us to grow our own food, or for and so they found some way, the food service department, to bring it in, and they brought in something like 12 of these bays. And when it was all set up and said and done, now over half of the lettuce and produce that they use on a regular basis is they grow themselves, right? So can folks really get to where they're growing all their own, lettuce for the district, for salads and for, topping their hamburgers and stuff? Or is this just more like a side hobby, or this really does become a serious part of the food production?
Yeah. So one thing too I want to touch on is that these nutrition school nutrition directors, they are really focused on the nutrition aspect, and it's something that I am sort of embarrassed to not know. Like, you sort of think about like growing up in the 80s or 90s and like, oh, so-and-so's mom is the lunch lady. And now I want to know more about like, what was it really like back then? Because what it's like now is way more than you are expecting it to be. And I found that out just like you, in my own school district in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, where my kids go to school. Guess what? We had a farm there too, and I didn't know about it as a parent.
Wow, that's crazy.
And of course, now I got to go talk to the nutrition director there and really talk about how she changed this program from buying sort of prepackaged things. So like, hey, we're doing things from scratch. She's like making her own gravy and like roasting her own turkey, like all of these things that thousands of districts across the country are doing this. What your perception of school lunch is,
right,
might be wrong.
What I heard, them say even here in Reading is like, hey, we would try to source lettuce from California farms, but sometimes it's California, sometimes it's northern, southern, sometimes it's Arizona. And often when we got our lettuce, we gave it like a 10-day shelf life just for safety, right? Because it's like, it may have had weeks in transit, and now it has something like a 4-week shelf life, because lettuce, once harvested, if still in the stem, can last a long time. And, but it's typically days from harvest to the kids consuming it. And I mean, like, what does that do for the kids and their interest in this program or vegetables? Like, what happens to them when they are actually seeing that process from harvest to eating?
Yeah, and it's much more nutrient dense too. So you're losing the nutrition out of that lettuce as it's traveling. So there's times where people are picking it in the morning and eating it for lunch the same day, like walking it down. A lot of these districts too, they're doing taste tests. So they're like making a customized lettuce blend to what their students like. You know, maybe there's some romaine or maybe there's some butter crunch. And the thing is too, is like, we're not necessarily trying to replace farmers or conventional agriculture. And I work a lot in Texas, and, you know, supporting Texas farmers is a huge thing, right? And we want to keep those farmers going too. You know, a lot of these nutrition directors, they have a nutritional interest as part of their job, a nutritional education piece to it. We're talking about physical activity. We're talking about good nutrition, healthy eating habits. When our children make their dinner, they're more likely to eat it. And guess what? When the kids are growing the lettuce and then they're telling their friends, like, I grew that, like, go grab a salad, like, they're doing it. And so that vegetable consumption is increasing in these schools where the kids are growing the food.
Well, and just think about, boy, the long-term benefits of kids getting excited about farming or growing their own food. Even if they don't farm, they'll have a deeper appreciation for where food comes from. And, you know, like you mentioned, I think the other day, the fun thing about lettuce is it grows fast. So kids get to see, even in a week, you know, how much the lettuce has grown. Then they get excited about it. Then they want to try it. You know, when we were making our kids pizza, you know, sometimes they'd eat it, sometimes they wouldn't. And then we figured out a while back, just make them make their own pizza, because that's one of the easy ones they can do. And they all eat it when they make it themselves. So yeah, lettuce is even better because the nutritional quality, the short distance between the farm, which is in the school, and the kid, and seeing that process and being a part of that process, yeah, it's just a home run. The kids are going to eat healthier, and they're going to say, like you said, like, I helped to make this salad today. I helped to make this lettuce, which is really cool. So I don't know, man, it's such cool technology. And it's funny because Advent Tech, we don't sell it, right? We don't sell for farm technology. They go directly to schools. But I wanted to interview you because I just thought this is one of the coolest things I've seen out there in educational technology recently. Like you said, there's other hydroponic solutions, but this one is just so simple and so flexible, and schools are doing it already. Like, lots of schools are doing it, and it looks like it's having these nutritional benefits and educational benefits. Any good advice on, like, how do you go find some funding for the Fork Farms units?
Yeah, there's a number of grants available, kind of depending on what you're doing. You know, some backing STEM initiatives, some from like the USDA. You know, some government grants out there as well. So there's places that maybe you don't think of. Sprouts Market has a foundation that has grants open right now that supports nutrition education and school gardening. Wow. So, you know, right, a lot of corporations have foundations. A lot of school systems have educational foundations as well. So just kind of finding the companies that have those priorities, nutrition and wellness, and go from there. So we're here to help people find those opportunities too, and as they come up.
Right. Yeah, and it's hard, you know, you guys sell across the nation, so it's hard to say, well, here's one in your state, but there probably is one in your state you could go find, whether it's a corporation, like you said, Sprouts, or it's the USDA because it's coming through a nutritional initiative, or it's some kind of title funds or something else because it really can fit into an educational initiative. I mean, it's kind of cool. It fits into both buckets, obviously, because you have a curriculum component as well. So
best use cases that we see, or the best partnerships, are when there's a relationship between some curriculum department, whether that's an ag program or special education, STEM in the library, and food service. Those partnerships are when we see kind of all of the light bulbs take off and the most impact. You know, there are a lot of schools, and now we're even finding universities too, that have food pantries, right? So they want to support their communities in that way too. So we work with, you know, larger food banks as well. But to see it, I think it's interesting that we've seen this come up, you know, in the school building, or now also we've seen it on campus at universities. Like we have one at Baylor University. We have a
Nice.
partnership with them where they're growing their own food for their students.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun too, because I mean, you really could have like Reading School District where I am, and they set these up. I think got about 12 pots. And, they set them all up at one school. They set them up at one middle school that now supports the other 10 schools in the district. And again, that's because the nutritional services director was at this school, and she said, hey, I really want to manage this. But again, they could have had a pod or 2 pods at every single school. So that's what's kind of nice about this is these self-sustaining hydroponic gardens. They do need some work. They need some supervision from an adult and maybe some kids, but they can be set up just about anywhere inside. And you don't even really prefer, this isn't really a greenhouse, you're not setting these up outside. This is truly like an inside hydroponic garden, right?
That's right. Yeah. We want it room temperature. Just that, depending on how big a classroom is, we've seen them right in the classroom.
Yeah. Wow.
So imagine that, like, you're talking about outdoor gardens, not having to like line up the kids to go walk outside and all of the distractions that can happen along the way, or that it's raining and all of your plans are changed. We're just walking to the back of the room in some cases.
Yeah, the Reading School District took an old locker room they weren't using anymore, and they converted it, which I thought was really cool because, again, they said, hey, we needed some storage, and we have this room we're not using, and we want to grow. And what's funny, because in Reading, California is a pretty good place to grow food. You would think, like, why don't they just have an outdoor garden? And they probably did, but during the summer, it gets to 100 degrees for a couple months and above in Reading. We've got a weird climate here. And then in the winter, you might have, rain for a couple months in a row. So with you guys' solution, you can literally grow all year round, right? I mean, you can, in Wisconsin in the winter, you can be growing your own produce.
That's, absolutely right. And, there's no weeding involved.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the heavy lift sometimes in those outdoor gardens. But the thing is too, even if people have an outdoor garden, sometimes you're using the Flex Farm to start the plant starts.
Oh,
and they're transplanting outside too. So that's what it's like. It's not really a this or that in these sort of situations. A lot of time it's an and. We have farms in Bakersfield, right? Big ag community in Bakersfield. And we heard from a partner there, and she kind of referenced that, they've students there whose parents are field workers, and now they have a better connection to like what their parents do.
We're trying to connect kids to the broader world of growing and farming, but then, like you said, even connecting kids back to what their parents do or their mother-in-laws in some cases, I think it's such a great connection, connecting kids to food, real food, and where it comes from. Like, it just doesn't seem like there's anything bad about, what you're doing. Right. And, sometimes when you're selling technology, you do wonder, is this technology truly benefiting kids and people in the way that I think it is? I hope it is. Is it being utilized properly? Is the chain of manufacturing as clean as I want it to be? Because sometimes you hear stories about things being done. And again, you guys are checking off all the boxes, right? It's like just nothing but positive effects for the kids, whether it's really a big nutritional initiative or it's a big educational initiative or it's both. It's like you're really benefiting kids, maybe creating some future Kyles, some future hobbyist farmers as well, or real farmers. I mean, we need farmers in our country.
Yeah, hydroponic farming, as an industry is growing. You might know the brand Gotham Greens, at Whole Foods. They've got, I think, 13 farms across the U.S. They have, one in Texas, 200,000 square foot hydroponic greenhouse. As an industry, growing hydroponically is growing. And, teaching, in like CTE coursework in certain high schools, this could be a job skill. It's a life skill.
Mm-hmm. For you guys, you really get into the science of growing. Like sometimes you just put stuff on the ground and it grows, and it's like, that's a great experience and that does something for you, but you didn't actually understand how it took nutrients from the soil. So in hydroponics, you really understand the science of it, the pH level of the water, the nutrients you're giving, what does the plant really need? What's interesting is from an educational perspective, you'll learn way more from hydroponics. And in many ways, you may get just a better crop because you did make sure you nutritionally fed, the lettuce the way that it was supposed to be fed. So
I'm horrible in my home garden for sort of fertilizing in certain ways, and I've done it haphazardly. But yeah, when you're doing hydroponics, it's like you've got to have the pH at the right level. You have to add the nutrients. You're documenting the changes as the plants get bigger. They're going to need more. You're going to need more water, more nutrients to continue to grow. So, yeah, to really know that process. It's like growing outside. It wasn't really luck. Maybe it was luck based on where you happened to plant it, but there was a reason why it was successful or unsuccessful.
Right.
And a lot of times, we're not doing soil samples as a home gardener. I know they are doing that in high school.
Yeah. Real farms, they do. And, there's sustainability and they're working on that, but it's like, you really understand that when you do a hydroponic garden. And it even sort of informs how you might think of regular farming, because it's like, well, wait a minute, how do they get all these nutrients out of the ground, these plants normally? And it's like, well, that's what they just do. And it's like, oh, okay. And this is why there's so much emphasis on sustainable farming and crop rotation. It's because once it takes a certain amount of nutrients from the soil, they've got to put something else in. So again, there's just so many cool things that you guys can teach to this program from a scientific perspective, on something that, kids probably just think is magic, or they just think comes from a store in a plastic bag. So this has been really informative for me to kind of get to know what it is you're doing at Fork Farms. And if anybody has any questions, I know you said they could reach out to you. So whether I post it on LinkedIn or you do or whatever, we'll make sure folks get back to you. And, thank you so much for your time and just kind of sharing what you guys are doing. It's really, really cool.
Thanks for having me, Charlie. Yeah, we believe everybody can be a farmer. So we'll help you along the way.
Yeah, very cool. All right. Thanks, Kyle. Have a good one.
Take care.